Hey folks, today we're going to look at the first three successful English colonies in the New World. Now, these colonies were settled by joint stock companies. They're the ones who paid for these voyages. And a joint stock company is a group of investors who pool their money together to pay for something. And whatever profits are made from the venture, they get a portion of that back through their stocks. So, one of the companies that did this was the Virginia Company. And this company was named after Queen Elizabeth. Her nickname was the Virgin Queen because she was never married. So they named it in her honor. So the Virginia Company came. And when they came to the New World, they came to the Chesapeake Bay area in an area called Virginia, named after Queen Elizabeth as well. And by this point, she was already dead, and King James was in charge. So when they settled the area, they named the river after him, the James River. And they named their first settlement after him, a town named after King James, Jamestown. That's where it comes from. And in Jamestown, it's going to be a rough start. There aren't very good relations with the Native Americans around. They're called the Powhatan or Powhatan, depending on how you like to pronounce it. And it's going to be a little rough for a bit. Now, luckily for Jamestown, there's a man on one of the ships who's going to be very helpful with dealing with Native Americans. And actually, he almost gets executed before even arriving. On one of the ships on the way there, he actually gets arrested for mutiny, which is trying to take over a ship. And so the plan is Captain Newport is going to execute him when they arrive. But when they get there, they open the letter from the company explaining the leadership and everything they need to do. When they open it, they find out that John Smith is supposed to be one of the leaders. Well, you can't execute him now because he's one of the ones in charge. So John Smith got a lucky break there. And he's one of a group of leaders. And so he doesn't play a big part at the beginning. He's just there. And the problem is all these people arrive and none of them have any training in how to survive. You don't have farmers. You don't have carpenters. Anyone that you would actually want to start a settlement in the middle of nowhere, they don't have them. They have a lot of poor people that are unskilled. They're also rich second sons who aren't going to inherit anything from their daddies back in England. So if they want to make money, they have to do it on their own. So they came looking for gold. But no one has experience with the things that actually matter for making the settlement. It was all about making the money for the joint stock company. Now for a while it's pretty rough because no one is working, growing anything because they don't really know how, but they're not even trying. They're not really building shelters, they're digging for gold. And if you've ever seen the Disney movie Pocahontas, there are about a billion things wrong with the movie, but one thing that's right is they're digging, and they're not finding any gold. They actually find something called iron pyrite, which is what we call fool's gold. So they think they find it, but it's not really gold. So they waste all this time on that. Their food's going down, and the question is, what are they going to do to survive? So John Smith, this is where he really steps up. He makes a policy that if men are not working, men do not eat. So work or don't eat. So this policy works pretty well. People start building shelters, finally, and they start trying to plant some crops a little bit. But to do this, they need some help. So John Smith ventures out to the Powhatan, and he meets Pocahontas. And the Disney movie will tell you that they get married. They do not. There's no love there. He's an old guy, 40s, 50s. She's like 12 or so. Nothing going on there. No, but she becomes a great ally for him. And so they make a peace treaty, and the Powhatan help them by giving them food and teaching them how to grow crops. So they start to do a little bit better. And later on, John Smith ends up having to go back to England. And when he does, people get lazy again. And when they don't have food, what they do, they try to steal from the Native Americans. And the Native Americans start attacking them, so then they can't leave the fort. And they start dying. And they have a horrible winter that's called the starving time. And it is rough. A huge part of the people die in Jamestown. And finally, in the spring, a new ship arrives with fresh food and people. And so they survive another year. Now on the ship, they have an important thing they have not had yet. They have women come. And this is a huge deal because, well, it's hard to repopulate and kind of make the settlement grow if you don't have any women. They're also helpful for cleaning, for cooking, all these things that the men are not well equipped to do. They're not used to that. They've never had to do it before, and they're trying to do everything on their own, and they just need some extra help. So it's very helpful that the women finally come. They also need some more people to start growing crops because of a man named John Rolfe. John Rolfe came and brought tobacco. And they weren't making money off of anything else. They're not making money off of the corn they're growing, and they didn't find anything worth money. But he comes and brings tobacco. And with this tobacco, they're able to make a lot of money in England. People are starting to love this stuff. And so they start growing it, and they need more laborers because it's a labor-intensive crop, which means there are a lot of steps in growing it. It takes forever. So these people that come are called indentured servants. And indentured servants are people who are very poor, but they really want to get to the New World. But there's no way they could afford the trip over. So what they do is they sign a contract, which is usually 4 to 7 years. And they say, I will work for you pretty much as a slave for that long. And when my time's up, I'm free to go. I can get a little bit of land maybe, some supplies, maybe a farm animal to help me, and then I can start planting tobacco. So their lives are miserable for 4 to 7 years. A lot of them die. It's terrible working conditions, but they're in the New World. They actually have a chance at land, which they never had in England. So this is a pretty good deal for them. So we have a lot of them coming, but after a while, it starts getting harder to get indentured servants to come. So they bring slaves. And these slaves are actually coming from the Caribbean. They're not coming from Africa. The slaves were already in the Caribbean from Africa. The Dutch had actually brought slaves from Africa to work in the West Indies, the Caribbean, to grow sugar cane. And so a Dutch ship comes and brings some slaves to Jamestown, and they think, oh, this will be pretty helpful. We're not going to have to pay them. And we didn't pay the indentured servants either, but we have them for the rest of their lives. So that's when slaves first come to the English colonies. Now John Rolfe is going to do something else pretty important. Remember, the relations got bad again with the Native Americans because we tried to steal their food. A lot. And so John Rolfe ends up marrying Pocahontas. So remember, John Rolfe marries Pocahontas, not John Smith. And the little way to remember that is Ring Rolfe. John Rolfe is the one who marries Pocahontas. Ring Rolfe. So I'd write that down as a way to remember that. So him doing that creates an alliance with the Native Americans again, with the Powhatan. And so this is going to be extremely helpful for the future of Jamestown. So Jamestown has grown a lot, and now they need a better government. It's been working fine how it is, but now that it's so much bigger, they need a little bit more. So they create something called the House of Burgesses. A burgess is a representative. It's someone that you choose to represent you in government. And so that means the House of Burgesses is the House of Representatives, like what we have. All right, that's where we got the idea from. And so these burgesses make the laws, and they do everything to make the government run properly and in a way that the citizens approve of. The thing is, it's not all citizens. It's only male citizens who are white and who own quite a bit of land. All right, so it's pretty specific who can vote. If you don't fit under those, then you're just not represented. So that means it's a little bit corrupt. Right, it is the citizens that are part of this, but these are citizens who are only looking after themselves. They're not really worried about the poor people. They're not worried about people called backcountry farmers. Backcountry farmers are people who live near the mountains. So they have smaller plots of land, not very good soil, starting to get a little rocky. They're not worried about them. They're worried about themselves, the people who live near the rivers, who have the best land. That's who they're worried about. So eventually, there's going to be a problem with this. And there's a man named Nathaniel Bacon. And Nathaniel Bacon starts a rebellion called Bacon's Rebellion. And he brings a lot of these backcountry farmers, and they attack Jamestown and burn the city to the ground. Their form of protest. And where are they protesting? They're protesting the fact that they don't have a say in government, that they're not treated well, that the House of Burgesses is only looking after the elite. And so after they clean up the city, they actually make some changes to kind of spread the amount of people who are represented in government. So I guess you could say it was successful. But that's America's first rebellion.